Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Romal Tune, and I am the author of Love is an Inside Job, which was my second book. My first book was God's Graffiti. And the most recent book, which is tied to this evening's conversation, is I Wish My Dad, The Power of Vulnerable Conversations Between Fathers and Sons. In a recent conversation with Najee, we talked about what might it look like for a group of artists to come together to have a conversation about the influence of fathers on their journey as artists and the influence of fathers in artistic expression and bringing that out of their children. So that's what our conversation is going to be about tonight. In just a moment, I'm going to ask each of our artists tonight to introduce themselves and give us one sentence, but I'll come back to that. One of the things I would ask you to do in one housekeeping detail is to make sure that your ringers and your cell phones are off as this conversation is being recorded for future use. So with that, I'm going to start just to my right and ask each artist one to introduce yourself and then follow that with, if you will, one word or one sentence that describes the importance of a father in your life or father figure.
Oh man, got to start off with the heavy questions. Yes, I'm Jamaal Barber, printmaker, podcaster, teacher, all the things, doing it here in Atlanta. Appreciate Najee and Romal joining this conversation up here with two fantastic artists, so really appreciate that. I guess support would be my word for what it is. I've gotten a lot of support from my dad and my family, my wife, and the motivation would be my second word if I had to give one, because my kids really inspired me to take my art seriously and get to the business and be serious about it.
That's solid. Kevin Williams, I'm a painter, artist, and father, most importantly. I would say fatherhood for me, it would be that groundbreaker, that path cutter would be the word that I would use, almost like a scout or a guide.
Greetings, my name is Jim Alexander. I'm a documentary photographer, better known as a participant observer. And I really got into photography through the back door when I was 17 years old. And then later on, after I went through several stages of life, I said, I better get back into photography, something that'll keep me busy.
Thank you. Everyone can hear me, yes? Great. So I want to follow up on the first question. A number of things came up. You said support, motivation, a guide. Just in keeping with that line of thought, and when you think about your journey as an artist, specifically in our context as Black men, what do you think that support for a young man should be, specifically as it relates to finding their artistic expression and their voice? What role would a father play in that?
Well, I think with a father, the role a father plays in finding your voice is showing you that they know their own. Mm-hmm. And I think with my father, he was a mathematician. He considered himself a molder of young minds. And being a figurative storyteller as a painter, a lot of my context in my work deals with educating my people initially, and then humanity secondarily. So I learned from him how strong education was. So that's like a main thing for me in my work. I think that as far as fatherhood goes, I think that, if you kind of can embrace your faults and your shortcomings and be transparent with how difficult it is for you to even form. I've had a stronger bond with my children, especially my son, based on being able to say, look, I'm not perfect. Even though my way that I went seems very exciting, it's not your path. And you have to be able to identify your own path and become a college graduate, which he will next month. I'm so excited about that because I dropped out. You know what I'm saying? So it's hard when you would drop out and successful to say, hey, look, stay in school. You know, so that's a difficult thing. But I think that all in all, it is being able to be open and transparent and know when to expose them to the truth in you.
And I want to hit on that too, because one thing I know about my dad is his own man, like no matter what it is. And I think that is the one thing that I learned from him that I took into my artwork, that just know yourself. And he always used to tell me, he was to laugh, it's like, you can't sit in a room by yourself. I mean, if you can't just sit and smile in the mirror at yourself, then you don't like yourself. It's like, what is this guy talking about? But like that's a good lesson, is that like I've accepted myself. And so that part of me I'm able to put in my artwork. So it's not directly about creativity, but the father was about, like you were saying, building a man, like building me up to know who I am separately. And so that allows me to do whatever I was going to put my mind to. I get to do that as Jamaal without the pressure of people judging me or feeling insecure. You just learn to embrace it and deal with it. So that part of it, I think is what he gave me.
At the time I came along, my father had 12 children. At the time I came along, my dad believed in, well, in the Navy they called it on-the-job training. And my dad believed in watching him do things. My dad was not a talker, okay? My dad, he was a mechanic, all right? I don't know how many of y'all may know of a Packard car, all right? Today, them cars that cost $400 brand new, back when he was a mechanic, today, those same cars range up around $200,000, $300,000, all right? But if he was working on a car, if we wanted, you know, a nickel or a dime or something, me and my brothers, you know, we would, when he was working on the car, we would go out there and work on the car. You know, we would wash the car or whatever, you know, and then a lot of times the people who owned the car, whose car my dad was working on, you know, they'd give us, shoot, anywhere from a nickel to $5. You know, it depends on what we did with the car. The same thing, my dad, he grew up on a farm, and that was something that he loved. So where I grew up at home, we had a big farm in the front of the house, and later on he had another big farm in the back of the house, you know, that used to be grass, you know, until my dad got there and he turned it into what they used to call victory gardens, you know. My dad grew everything. So, but we had to watch him do things. And if it was something that you thought as hard as you could think, then you could ask a question, and he would give you an answer. But you better think about it first, you know. And if you couldn't figure it out, then you could ask.
I want to stay there. You mentioned the OJT with your father, on-the-job training kind of aspect of it. You have a picture next to you. Can you tell us a little bit about that picture?
This is a picture I'm very proud of, but that's the only picture. I started shooting pictures in 1952. This is the only picture I ever shot of my father. All right.
How old were you when you shot that picture?
31. I was 31. I started shooting when I was 17. What happened was in the Navy, I was in boot camp in 1952. The second week that I was in boot camp, we were behind the barracks shooting dice for nickels and dimes. And I rolled a 10, and this one guy says, I bet you $10 you can't make that 10. I said, bet. I didn't have $10, him either. And I rolled the 10, and I said, give me my money, man. And he said, just a minute. So he runs in the barracks, and he comes back, and he has a little yellow box. I opened the box. I'm wondering what are you going to do? What are you doing with the money in the box? You know. And there's a camera in there, a Brownie Hawkeye. He said, keep this to payday, and I'll give you your $10 payday. All right. Payday came around. We didn't get but $10. And he said, man, just keep the camera. My mama made me bring this. I ain't gonna shoot no pictures. I said, all right. So I guess there might be 2 people or 3 people in here at the most who may have heard of Walter Winchell. Use him, right? Walter Winchell was one of the best known newscasters in the world. And one of his relatives was stationed on the base. And there was going to be an event, and Walter Winchell was coming, you know, with the family. And what happened was this guy got sick, and Walter Winchell wasn't coming, but I didn't know it. I had went and bought some film. I said, I'm going to take pictures of Walter Winchell. I went over to PX and bought some film. Guy showed me how to use the camera and all of that, okay? And Walter Winchell didn't come. I said, oh, I done spent my money on this, on this film. So one of the guys said, take my picture. I was standing out there, this was on a Saturday morning. We had been out on what they call the grinder. We had been marching everything that we had to do anyway at that event. And he said, take my picture, man. I said, 50 cents. And he said, I'll give you 50 cents. Uh-huh. So I took his picture, and everybody else I could get to say, yeah, I want a picture for 50 cents. Because, you know, I got to get the whole roll developed, you know. So that's what I did. So I started taking pictures of the guys for 50 cents. And I did that the whole time I was in boot camp, taking pictures for 50 cents, all right? And it didn't cost me, but I guess maybe $1, $1.25 or something to get it developed and printed. You know, each picture cost me about 6 cents, you know. So that was good. That's what I did. And so I don't guess y'all want me to tell my whole story right now. I'll tell a little more later on as I go in.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And, you know, I found in writing, I Wish My Dad, I asked all of the men, there are 17 men in that book, and at one point I asked them to send me pictures that they had of themselves with their fathers. Of 17 men, 2 actually have pictures of them with their fathers. And those 2 pictures were very old. And the other guys, the very question, send me a picture of you with your dad, traumatized them because they realized, like, I don't have any. Now, they had plenty of pictures with their moms, but they didn't have many pictures with their fathers. So I find that, you know, having that one image actually isn't a unique experience. It's something that, and not just for the African-American men, but for men in general, because this book has a variety of cultures in it. It's just not something that has been intentionally done with our fathers to capture those moments. And so I want to name that for all of us in the room who still have the opportunity to capture those moments, because later in life you look back and realize how valuable they are. I want to come back to a couple of key words you brothers used. You said knowing, Kevin, you used the word knowing yourself, right? The father has to know himself before he can educate his son. You guys use the language of vulnerability, being your own man. So as an artist, and that's a loaded statement, knowing yourself, being your own man. Ideas of manhood are multifaceted, right? There's no one way to truly be a man, especially if you're trying to be your own man, right? So in raising a child, I'm curious to know how that idea of manhood and becoming your own man can influence your artwork. Like when I look at the work of an artist, it tells us something about the artist, how they see the world, but also how that artist sees himself. So I would love to hear each of you talk about how cultivating this idea of manhood, especially being a black man in America, how that has shown up in who you are as an artist, like, and what your dad did for you, and how you see yourself doing that for other young men.
Well, I mean, it's hard not to give the background for it, but my dad, he grew up in Memphis and moved to Chicago, where I grew up. I was born and grew up in Chicago. And I would say at 16, I remember asking him for a couple of dollars. And anytime before that, he was cool, he'd give me $1 or $2. And so his response was, "You not my pimp." He said, "You can't have nothing." He said, "By law, I need to give you a roof over your head, and we had dinner at 8, okay?" And I thought it was the most traumatic thing I'd ever heard at the time. But he knew how difficult the city was that I was growing up in. And instead of coddling me like he did my 2 sisters, I was the only male, it turned me into a very efficient hunter and provider. So at 16, I became an entrepreneur. At 16, I started going door to door and selling my artwork. I was published as a book illustrator at 16. That was my first gig. By 19, I was a cosmetology illustrator for Soft Sheen Hair Products. So I was traction so early because I knew that wasn't an avenue to go in anymore, okay? But because my father was also an educator, at night he worked at the main post office, during the day he taught mathematics. Him being an educator, he had given me history books because he was part of developing the math curriculum for the Chicago public school system. So he knew the history curriculum. And so he wanted me to know about my history, my culture's history. And so he gave me these books. But in him giving me these books, I became very defiant as far as education came. So every time I would take history in school, it was like, nah, that's not true. That's not true. It didn't happen like that. No, you guys did this. You understand what I'm saying? But I ended up handing these same things down to my son. And I remember cutting my son off. And he used the word fair. He said, "That's not fair." I said, "Don't ever use that word again." I said, "That word does not apply to you in this country. What you need to do is be prepared to take care of yourself and to take care of everything that I built for your mom and your sister. because that's what I ended up having to do when my father dropped dead at 59. Okay? So my son accused me of prescribing penicillin for everything. He said, you just give penicillin for everything. You know, you feel got a common cold, penicillin. Break your arm, penicillin. You know what I'm saying? And so I said, son, well, the problem is this. I raised you till you were 18. And this is how it was told to me. I knew I raised a good man. When I took my hands off you, though, I had to see what kind of nigga you was. And that was the reality. I don't know you as a man of your own. I knew what I put into you. I knew what I had taught you. I knew what I had given you. But I don't know if you're weak. I don't know if you are ambitious. I don't know if you're driven. You understand what I'm saying? I don't know if you're a follower or a leader. I know I gave you leader DNA, but I don't know if you're a follower. And he went out there and rebelled, and he followed, and he followed, and he followed, and he finally got into a red zone that he turned his life around and said, okay, now I see what you were showing me and myself. You're way more brilliant than me. Academics come to you with ease. Take that path. And he's been on that path for the last 3 or 4 years. And it's amazing that I see what he does. And I said, son, the company you work for, one of the top executives of that company is a very good friend of mine. But I haven't introduced you to him for one reason. Because I got to make sure you're ready. Do you understand what I'm saying? But he done took himself from a beginning position to a great position on his own. And it's ironic because he works for one of the airlines. And he started on a ramp unloading luggage and loading up luggage. Now he works in the Sky Club in customer service, right? And he's got his tailored uniform on and they rave about him. And his mother and the wife of this executive, who they're friends, are in the Sky Club, and my son is working. And all they're hearing is the praise of how well he's been raised, how good he's doing. And I'm saying, that's beautiful, because that's all you. You understand what I'm saying?
So with your father, it sounds like he gave you a work ethic, right?
Yeah, my father gave me a hell of a work ethic.
That shows up in the business of art for you.
Yeah.
And the creation of art, it sounds like when he gave you those books to read and that history, knowing, having seen your work, I can see.
Right. It's like know yourself. Like I said, it's like know yourself and be okay. Like my family motto in our house is we know who we are and we're cool with it. Okay? I don't want to raise somebody that wasn't happy with who they were. Don't idolize someone else because they have something physical that you may not have. Or don't degrade someone because they may not have what you have materialistically. Know who you are and be cool with that. It doesn't mean you're not ambitious. It's just you're not coveting someone else's life. You don't know what other tragedy or pain or consequences they paid to have those things that they have.
So for you, it was that your father, in terms of your artwork, instilled that ambition. Do you sense that the reading has shown up in your artwork?
Yeah, I mean, my father kind of played me. He was a very smart man, so he knew that I wanted to prove it to him. He wasn't on board with the arts like that. It just was my passion. You understand what I'm saying? My father was a mathematician. Like I had to make it mathematically make sense to him. Like, okay, how are you going to take care of a family because you painted this beautiful picture? Show me how that works. And then when I started to manufacture prints of my work and I was able to show him statements, and you could see that these 8 paintings sold $50,000 worth of prints each year. And then he's like, okay, that's 400. Okay, I see, I understand. I see how you made this money. And then that's how we share the same language. Ironically, when I cleaned out his locker at his school after he had passed away, I found this pencil sharpener. I think Jamaal's been in my studio, and I had this in this glass case. And it's the company that created it is called Sanford, and they're based in Chicago. And I realized it was a tool that he used to solve math problems, and it makes sharpens pencils, and I create art with that. So I felt like we had a common bond with a common instrument. And we still do the same thing. I'm educating, I just do it through art.
Jamaal, just coming back to the same question in regards to how your father, the way he has poured into you and showed up in your life, has shaped and influenced who you are as an artist.
Yeah, I think back when what Kevin was saying about you have to understand the context is that my dad never met his father. Well, I'll take that back. He met him when he was in his 30s. I was 18 when my dad met his dad. I've seen him twice my whole life. And a lot of what his life experience was raising himself in a house full of women and raising his brothers and putting himself in that position where he could protect his family, he could protect himself and provide for himself, because he grew up in very tough neighborhood. And even when he had me, I mean, this was Richmond, Virginia in 1980s. I think it was the murder capital of the US in 84 or something like that when we moved. So a lot of his thing that he wanted to do was just be different from that guy. And he did it, but he did it in his own way in which he felt was the best way to do it, because he didn't have an example. So he built this idea of a father in himself and then gave it to me. And so I don't know if it was right or wrong. I just know that his experiences influenced my upbringing greatly, because he never wanted, he wanted me to know he wouldn't leave. That was big for him. That feeling of abandonment. And, he's an old school, Southern man. He ain't finna tell y'all this. He might be mad I'm saying it right now, but you can see it and how much he never wants to talk about his emotions. He doesn't want to do the mushy stuff. He wants to just provide, do what he can, show up and be strong. And he always told me that he didn't have a father. And so he created a life for me where I didn't have to deal with the things that he had to deal with, the fighting, the going out in the streets and protecting people. He lost his brother to gang violence. And so all of this stuff, he protected me from it. And so if I give you, that's what he would say, if I give you this, a stage that's set for you that doesn't have the dangers, what would you do? And so he gave me a lot of room to think for myself and to explore and to read and to do these drawings, because I didn't have to go outside and fight other people to survive. And so we moved to North Carolina to get away from the violence. And he provided for us. He went out and worked 2 or 3 jobs. You know what I'm saying? He did lawn care. He was a pig breeder for Carol's Foods. He's proud of that. If y'all ever ate bacon in the last 10 years, he probably was the one that grew the pigs. And so, I think that was his thing. And I think that's how he showed love. Me and my dad never say, I love you. But I feel that he loves me. And I know I've accepted that part of him is just the limitation of his life, that he can't do this thing. And it's okay, right? You just learn to accept the men for who they are. And I know that once a year, I just have to go hug my dad before he says anything. I just come in the house, I just give him a hug. He's gonna, he tenses up because he don't quite know how to do it. But I don't know, that's my thing, right? And so he gave me this kind of platform that allowed me to think for myself, allowed me to read and explore and develop and be more artistic and be protected in that way that I get to develop in a way that he didn't get to develop. Because I started drawing because of my dad. My dad spent a little time upstate, that's what he said, because he did some things. And he sent my mom a birthday card and he drew it on a manila envelope. I still remember it because I thought like, yo, you buy these from the store, but he made it. Like, you drew this? Like, it was that type of like, yo, you can create things. And so all the like books and stuff I was reading, I started looking at it different because it was like, somebody did this. I could do this. Like, why not? And so that ability to have the space to think, I think was one of the big things that he gave me, along with being able to know myself and to fix things and be assertive, the strength that he showed across my entire life, just in being able to provide for people. He's like a very giving person, even though he doesn't express it in verbal ways like I do with my son. And so I take that with my son now, is just to create the environment where he gets to exist and then be himself. And so I give him a house, I give him a safe spot, I buy him the clothes, I give him food. But what are you going to do? What do you want to do? And that's more of like the question that he would ask me. And that's what I ask my son. And that's why I teach too. And I approach all my students in the same way. Like, this is your life. Let's cultivate the journey to see exactly what you want to say, because there's something you want to say. Everybody has something to say inside of them. And so we just have to, we can find the core of what it is, and you find happiness on the other side, whatever that looks like for you. And so I think that's the main thing that helped
So it
contribute.
sounds like, one, he in your home, he created this safe space for you to be yourself.
Yeah.
Without judgment.
Yeah.
And two, your art came from seeing him actually create something for your mother.
Yeah, yeah. And then he wasn't, it's one of them stories. I mean, you get this a lot where like, I used to draw like back in the day, you know what I'm saying? Like, he say I got all my talent from him. So he should be, I should be glad that he didn't use it. That's what he said. But yes, and I think, and it was a work ethic thing too, because he showed me a lot about how a man is supposed to show up for himself, one, just in providing. Like, you do whatever you have to do to get it done. Like, if the car break down, I gotta walk to work. It's that type of thing. Like, so like that kind of determination, that solidness in yourself is what you transfer to other people. And like the care and how you do it, because I learned to verbalize from my mom, but I learned the spirit from my dad, if that makes sense.
That's good. I want to stay there for just a moment before moving on to some other questions. And in a little while, we'll take some questions from the audience. Much of what I've heard each of you talk about in regards to what your fathers gave you as you became the creative that you are has been to the extent of, hey, I got a good work ethic from them. I learned to hustle. You use some very strong words in regards to your son and passing that down. I knew I raised you to be a good man, but I didn't know what kind of nigga you were. Right? That's triggering for some people. I get it, right? Because I come from a context where that would have been the same language used, right? Like, how are you going to stand up for yourself? What kind of backbone do you have, right? But in listening to all of you, what I'm hearing is what I often hear from men about what it means to be a man. And typically that is tied not to your being, but to your doing, right? Your manhood is totally defined by what you can do and provide. And that, as a result, has shaped the mindset that what I can do and provide determines who I am, determines if I'm a man. As someone who is in therapy and has been for over a decade now, I've learned that it's actually the opposite. Your being comes way before your doing.
Yeah.
Right? Everything that you do is actually a manifestation of who you already are. be it the good or the bad. The bad is typically a manifestation of the pain and the things you haven't worked on. Now, I have a son. My son is 22. My son didn't grow up like me. I grew up single parent home. My mom was a drug addict and alcoholic. She overcame that. I panhandled, I hustled. My kids grew up in the suburbs. They went to really good schools and really nice neighborhoods. So my fear early on was that my son's gonna be soft. And my kids will not understand struggle. They need to know what a mayonnaise sandwich tastes like. They need to have some sugar water. What I learned is that trying to instill ways of being in them that equip them for struggle, for challenge, for difficulty, was actually rooted in handing down to them the skills that were handed down to me. I'm going somewhere with this. With my uncles and my grandfather who raised me, their assumption was this: if he is going to live the way that we live, he is going to need the skills that we need. He's going to learn, he needs to know how to survive, how to fight, how to be tough. He cannot feel, because in this context of this neighborhood, feeling is weakness and dangerous. So if his life is going to only be in the confines of what we've lived, then this is what we need to give him. The problem with those skill sets is that they're tied to staying at the bottom. He's going to need to know how to survive here. If they had a vision for who I could become outside of the projects, outside of an environment of violence and addiction and pain, they might have wanted to give me a different set of skills and how to show up in the world. Are y'all following? The challenge is, even if they wanted to, they didn't know how. My son, and being the loving hugger that he is, you know, I used to be triggered by hugs, right? I had a 3-second rule. Yeah, get out of there in 3 seconds before this gets out. But I learned it actually takes 20 seconds to get all of the feeling from a hug. To me, 20 seconds is cuddling at that point. But what I'm saying is, for some of us, we have been handed down skills that we no longer need. And we have to be mindful in cultivating a generation of people who are living into their own identity as men, their own artistic expression, to wonder, are there things that you need to unlearn as a man in order to pass down what is actually needed to the next generation, so that you are not passing down trauma skills that they will no longer need? So I think that's the question. Are there things that you've learned as an artist in the business and in the creation that your father taught you that you had to unlearn? And if so, what are they?
Let me take you to this picture, because I stopped earlier. I have a tendency to suck up all the air. So I didn't want to do that. But like when I was hustling pictures in the Navy, when I was finished boot camp, I went to, my first duty station was Charleston, South Carolina, at the Navy Yard. When we took our tests in the Navy, mechanical ability, I was really good at that because my dad was a mechanic, and and I learned that. But I went there in the 50s, early 50s, when racism was, anybody know anything about Charleston, South Carolina, that's where the slaves came in. All right? But growing up in a little white town in New Jersey, one of 7, 8 boys who was in the house all at the same time. You know how that competitiveness is, right? we were good at whatever it was we did growing up, me and my brothers, all right? And sending me at 17 to Charleston, South Carolina, the home of the Ku Klux Klan. I had all I could do to keep from doing a Uvalde, you know what I'm talking about, down there, because I couldn't stand when I went into town and all of that, you know, I didn't want nobody to talk to me, you know, any kind of way, and all of that stuff. But I met this photographer on the base. He taught me different things about photography on the base. But also, I hung out with a bunch of brothers in the Navy who were drunks, and I became a drunk. That's what we did. We had fun. You had the black community down there with folks called King Street area, you know. And then from there, they sent me to Virginia, same thing, you know. All right, from there. So I was able to go to California, and where did I hang out? Watts, Central Avenue, you know. Got out of the Navy mad, really, because I might not still be stationed with these guys, but I had to sleep with them on the ships, you know. And I was going to do what you're supposed to do as a young black man or a young anybody. You're supposed to get a job and do this and do that, you know. And I gambled in the Navy, and I made a lot of money. But when I went and got this job, and I worked like hell for the first 2 weeks, and I got this little brown envelope, and the amount of money that I got in this little brown envelope, I would throw on the ground for, you know, for just to shoot dice, you know. And I looked at this little brown envelope. I had worked 2 weeks, and I think I had $64. And I looked at this $64, I said, now this is what the rest of my life is gonna look like, working like I worked. No, So I went into the streets, all right? And I went into the streets, and I found, and I became an alcoholic, if you would. I drank 24/7. I enjoyed it. Okay, I had good fun. I'm leaving a lot out, but I woke up one morning, I had been drunk round the clock. Went to the dresser to pour a drink. This is in February 1964. I had a lot of life in between that. None of it consisted of art and photography, none of that, you know. But I read. I was always a reader. Got that from one of my brothers. And I poured a drink, and when I picked the cup up, I had this cup that said, "Welcome to Atlantic City." Really welcome me to hell, you know, but anyway, that's what the cup said. And this voice said to me, "Boy, you're killing yourself." And I looked around with nobody in the room but me. I put the cup down, put the bottle down, and I've never had another drink to today. I've never had another drink. What am I going to do? All right? I left town. A friend of mine that I was living in New Jersey at the time. A friend of mine, his family, he was a drunk too. His family had came and got him and brought him back to Massachusetts. I went up there, got a job working with his brother, stayed up there a while, got over all the junk in my head and stuff, even the fear of going back to Patterson, New Jersey. All right? But I then came back to Jersey, worked at different things, detailing cars and stuff like that. And what am I going to do at this time that I was in the street? I bought a camera. A Minolta Himatic 9 rangefinder. That's what I bought. And I started taking pictures for people in the community, whatever, all right? Had a couple of pretty good paying jobs. I loved running the streets in Harlem. So I met different people in Harlem, different places. I had an occasion of meeting Gordon Parks Jr. And, you know, you meet somebody, you both got cameras and everything, you know, and hanging out and so on and so forth. That's in the 60s. He introduced me to his father. Okay? And everybody, if you read, you know, this was the Black Godfather, you know, okay? I was working, taking pictures, all of those things, you know, had a pretty good job doing things. I got a job as the general manager of a newspaper delivery service. My family, whenever they would be around me, they would get real close when they have a conversation to see if they smelled alcohol, you know, because they figured if anybody was going to quit drinking, it wasn't going to be me, not Jim Alexander. But anyway, this job that I had, this one Sunday morning, I had to work on Sundays. My dad used to come by my office. He felt so proud. The one thing I wanted him always to come by in the morning before he went to church on Sundays and have a cup of coffee with me. Because I wanted to prove to him that all of these things that I had been for these 4 or 5 years, you know, anyway, I wasn't anymore. Mm-hmm. Okay? So this one morning I had him step outside in front of my office, and I took this picture of him. Okay? It's a slide, right? And to make a long story short, Dr. King was assassinated in '68. And I was at Gordon Parks' office. Gordon, a lot of people don't know it, Gordon Parks was the creative director of Essence Magazine. When they started Essence Magazine, Gordon was the head art-related person. And I say to Gordon, I said, Gordon, I said, these people that got all in these newspapers and stuff, I said, in my office every morning, they always talking about this free at last stuff. You know, I said, we ain't free at last. I said, I'm going to just document black people for 10 years. Mm-hmm. Black people culturally, and I'm going to document human rights. I don't believe in civil rights. Gordon said, well, James, he's one of the few people that called me James instead of James. You know. He said, well, James, he said, sounds like you got a plan. He said, but your ass is going to starve. He said, ain't nobody going to pay you to just run around shoot what you want to shoot. I said, no, but I got the GI Bill. I've already signed up at the New York Institute of Photography. And I'm going to get a piece of paper and I'm going to teach photography. And I'm going to do my documentary work. 20 years later, when they had the first National Black Arts Festival here in Atlanta in 1988, any of y'all was here at that time? All right? I had this exhibit at the Apex. The Apex used to be upstairs and downstairs. Crystal Britton, who was a curator. Crystal Britton curated an exhibit of my music photographs for the National Black Arts Festival. And I was photographer in residence at Clark at the time, and Clark contributed to the exhibit. And Gordon Parks, Ossie Davis, Sonia Sharp, a lot of other people came to the opening of my exhibit. And Gordon had me walk him through my pictures in the exhibit, 60 pictures, one at a time. And when we got to the last picture, Gordon turned to me and he said, "Well, Jim," he said, "you ran around and shot what you wanted to shoot." He remembered what he had said to me 20 years earlier. Although we talked from time to time on the phone, I had moved to Connecticut. I moved to Atlanta. Maynard brought me down here to teach at the Neighborhood Arts Center. Okay. But that whole thing, I had printed a picture of this, the smaller one, and I had it, I always took it with me, and I always had it somewhere. All right? My life was dedicated to proving to my dad that I could be more than what I could be. But I had two father figures. One of them was Gordon Parks, and the other one was somebody who was probably only 4 or 5 years older than me, Chuck Stewart. Anybody know Chuck Stewart? Chuck Stewart. Y'all, everybody needs to look online for Chuck Stewart. Chuck Stewart was the greatest jazz photographer ever. All right? Okay? But he didn't get the credit that those other people who were doing pictures. That album, John Coltrane's most famous album, all right? He did all the pictures inside, and the white guy who owned the recording company had did one of his little make-believe cameras and put it on the cover. They didn't put Chuck's picture on it. But anyway, his family lives down here now. Chuck died a few years later, a few years ago. But I still, for anybody who knows, I still kept doing what I did. I taught photography all those years, from the 60s to, I guess, still now, I guess. Renee would say, yeah, he's still trying to teach photography, you know. But yes, but I've always mentored, I've always had mentees, always, through all those years, okay?
Yeah, I want to thank you for that, Jim, because I think that when you talk about alcoholism, not only naming it, but owning it as something that you had to overcome in order to find your artistic expression, and making that decision, that hard decision, and I know it's hard as someone who grew up with an alcoholic in the home, to find it within yourself. And I think we find that in many families, where it's the silent, you know, it's the secret. You mentioned people leaning over to see if they can
Well,
swim.
mine was no secret, I was
But I think that, well, right, for some of us it's the secret, for some of us it's everybody knows.
Yeah.
But I think what I want to celebrate and what you said was the inner strength to stop and find a passion that became the focus of your life and then model that. I think it's important in context when we have the opportunity to give voice to those things, because it becomes an example for other people to know that it is possible. Because for some of us, at times we often wonder if people can overcome, or will they ever. And so to hear a story of, yes, you know, I'm a witness, I'm an example that you can, is very helpful. I also think that, that's one of those, sometimes what we need to unlearn, and finding ourselves and artistic expression is unlearning habits that we picked up along the way. So I still want to come back to both of you in regards to that question. Are there any things that, in finding your voice as an artist, that you had to unlearn that you picked up from your father?
You want to go first? Or?
No, you go.
Okay. Well, for me, I can't say it's anything that I would have wanted to unlearn, because I feel like the trauma that, say, I may have been handed down from my father gave me the tools that I needed to adapt in the environment that I was growing up in. So for me, it was what I needed at that time. The trauma that I may have handed to my son is working for him. You understand what I'm saying? It's like, because I had someone that was stern with me and spoke to me a certain way, I speak to my son the same way my dad spoke to me. And it has worked for him. Now, once he becomes successful, such as myself, and and you spoke on this earlier, you may want to tap into some level of therapy to deal with some of the things that you had to become to thrive and survive in the environments that you were in. I grew up on the Southside of Chicago. There was nothing. My father was probably the kindest person he could have been to me, knowing what I was in. You understand what I'm saying? And anything he said to me was pale in comparison to what I heard from the streets. So every day he went to work and I was out there in them streets, he knew that the streets were gonna give me a certain level of fatherhood too. You understand what I'm saying? And even though my father, he had his ways with me. He would take a drink in between his jobs. He worked 2 full-time jobs, so he would drink 100 proof Granddad to accelerate going to sleep at night, okay, when he got through teaching. And I was a young boy, went in his bedroom and talked to him, and I said, "Dad, can I have some of your tea?" I thought it was tea. And he said, "Yeah, go ahead," right? And I drank it, and I mean, it burnt my whole body. I'm 57 years old, I've never drank liquor in my life. From that one time I tasted liquor, okay? Now, every summer we would go to Memphis, and he grew up in a rough part of Memphis, and there would be these guys standing under this tree, right? And every time we'd pull up, he said, "Yeah, that guy right there, he was a star football player. Ooh, that guy over there, he could really sing." He said, "Every year we come down here, one of them guys gonna be gone." Mm-hmm. And for sure, every year, one of them guys was gone till there wasn't nobody left. And I never wanted to be the person that people said, "Yeah, that's dude, he was real talented. He could paint his behind off. Man, look at him now." So I never did drugs. So my father had his ways of giving me guidance without trying to control me. You know what I'm saying? And so even with the gangs, I was affiliated, but I was never in a gang. But the gangs knew my passion was painting, and they kind of protected me and said, "Okay, well, yeah, don't mess with him. Leave him alone," And then when I started making money, then the gangs was trying to extort you. You know what I'm saying? And then I had a brother that was a Muslim, and I met him, he was a gangbanger, but he was trying to airbrush t-shirts in the back of a beauty shop. And he got it, into the Nation of Islam, and he with us. Don't touch him. And so I've always had not only fatherhood, but brotherhoods through different factions of life that I never participated in and feel comfortable passing judgment on based on it contributed to my survival. And at times, I have to talk to somebody to say, yeah, maybe I can deal with some of this stuff, some of this stuff now, but I wouldn't change a thing, to be honest with you. I pray that I wasn't too hard on my son, but to be honest with you, I don't think I was, because he went and was raised by Atlanta streets on his own. He grew up in a suburb of Atlanta. He grew up with things I never had or was given. I greenlit things because of his mother that I never would have given a young boy. You understand what I'm saying? And when he went out there and tore it up, I said, okay, that's it. Now you're on your own. Well, can you just replace the car? No. I'm finna replace your transportation. Now you got transportation. You had a whip. Now you get transportation. You understand what I'm saying? Yeah. And so, the big bow on it, everything. We did the whole show. I never would have given him that on my own. But my wife said, this is your life now. My daughter's in a private school, diverse. I didn't do any business. I didn't meet a white person until I became successful. Right. Literally. You understand what I'm saying? So, in what the success provides, I think you have to take a step back and say, okay, well, I can't really protect them. I could give them everything I have, though. And some of the things aren't going to be the best things for you, and some of them will. And in spite of my shortcomings, hopefully you still love me the way I still love my dad. You understand what I'm saying? We rarely had those hugs. We got one or two pictures. But I remember when he was transitioning, the night before, he had a battle with cancer. And he was telling me, he said, he had my sister call me. She said, because I was here, said, you need to come home. Dad said he need to talk to you. Got on a plane, got to Chicago. Dad said, hey, look, I'm ready to check out. We at the hospital, right? I said, okay, you ready? What you mean? He said, I'm ready to check out. I'm ready to go. I don't want to go here. Get me home. So it was like my accelerant into manhood was so quick. It was like, got him home, they brought the bed, hospice came in, everything was going on. I had to shoot back to Atlanta for something. He said, hey, look, before you leave, because he knew I didn't want to see him die. He said, before you leave, I need you to do something for me. And I'm crying on the bed. He's like, hey, we ain't got time for that. He said, this is what I need you to do. If I don't look myself in that casket, keep it closed. I want this, I want that, I want this. Take care of your mother, take care of your sisters. I left them straight, they good. I said, I got everything you built and will maintain it. He said, I know you will. He said, this whole thing was a test and gave me peace of mind. I'm ready to go now. So what he said to me at 16 about them $2, you understand what I'm saying? It came full circle. It was the right thing to say to me. It may not have been the right thing to say to a softer kid. It was the right thing to say to his son. You understand what I'm saying? So a lot of this stuff gets straightened out now at 57 years of age. You know what I'm saying? It was right there with my wife, with me not listening. We got married. She like, you just don't listen. I said, yeah, you're right. I don't. I had so many people telling me not to become an artist and ridiculing me trying to become an artist that I literally stopped listening to people. I only wanted to hear my own voice. So now I end up realizing I got a wife I wasn't even listening to because I didn't want to hear somebody else's voice. You understand what I'm saying? So the trauma that I learned in a negative behavior was what I was needed to get through that time, but I'm having to correct now to have a successful life.
Right, thank you for that.
This right here, this is my business card, but this picture, that's Gordon Parks and I walking through my exhibit in 1988. Sandra Sharp, the actress, she shot this picture. I didn't know she was following.
That's a beautiful, beautiful picture.
All right?
Yeah.
But this is that picture, all right? And he died a few years later, you know, all right, well, quite a few years, but I said, well, this is my memory. And I even put that quote on there, you know, on one of the cards, I think, that where he said, your ass is gonna starve. I always remember that, okay? When he told me, he said, your ass, you know, way back when, and I never forgot that, all right? I never could be what I was wanting to be until Dr. King was assassinated. All right? I wanted to be another Gordon Parks, you know, but magazines and all of that stuff, you know. And I looked the morning that that Martin Luther King was assassinated. I worked in a newspaper delivery service. All of the magazines, newspapers and everything that came in, you know, to the place. And they never had a really good picture of Gordon as what he was, which was a great photographer. All right? And a father and all of that. And Dr. King, all right? They had one picture, one of Gordon's pictures, you know, that was in Life magazine. But Dr. King, they had pictures of him in your home. Remember the people, the Italians threw the bricks at him and Cicero and all of that,
Yeah.
all right? Those are the pictures that they had of him, okay? And I said, well, damn, that man was a father, all of those things, you know. Okay, and that was something I said, well, if they ain't got no better pictures of black people than that, I'm gonna shoot them. So that's what I did. They shot us, pictures of us ever since. And I threw that commercial photographer out the window. All right, I said, well, I'm gonna do it. I'll teach photography, I'll feed my family.
Thank you. Jamaal.
What was the question?
The question, and it's the last question. I would like to take two, if there are any, and then some closing remarks. The question was looking at the journey with your father and being either a father or father figure to the next generation. Do you see that, are there any things that you picked up that you might need to unlearn for the next generation?
I think it was less about unlearning and more about understanding. Because like we've been saying, like, you know, that his life story raised me, but his life story doesn't raise my son, right? Like, so my son is a completely different person than who I was. And it's because of the same thing he talked about where, like, if I make a stage, you get to make your own stage and go higher than what I could have done. And so now my son should go higher than me. Like, that's the whole like point of it. And so we keep building these like safe spaces for the next generation to thrive and become their own persons. And so we're talking a lot about how the fathers are providing and changing the context of their son's life, right? Like, your father was a professor and did his thing. Like, Jim's father, like, did his thing. Like, my father did his thing. So now, what is incumbent on me and what my son do and how I relate to him? I can't relate to him the same way my dad related to me because my son is not me. And so my son is, in a lot of ways, some people will call him soft. I call him very caring. My son is very empathetic of people. Like, my son is the son that invites the boy that nobody talks to his birthday party and hangs out with him and plays, like, and bowls with him for hours after everybody leaves. That's my son. He's not a fighter. right? When he plays soccer, I got to tell him, stop letting them little kids take the ball from you, because he's so much bigger than them, but he doesn't want to hurt anybody. And so I could go my way. My father would probably try to get it out of him, right? To try to give him aggression, to try to make him to change who he is. That's not his heart. And so I have to be able to understand what my dad wanted me to do was be able to take care of myself. The way that he did it was his way, but the way that I have to let my son do it is a way that's going to benefit him, because I'm like Kevin. I didn't have a meaningful conversation with a white person until I went to college. Like, and that's just because of segregation in North Carolina. Like, it's a whole thing that we can talk about, like, on a different day. But like the way that I grew up, he's not growing up like that. And so he doesn't have the same skills I have, because he doesn't need the same skills that I had. And the same way I tell him all the time, like, you know, we used to eat bologna sandwich and noodles for like dinner. Used to fix my everybody in the house pancakes, because that's all we could afford. He's never had bologna. Doesn't know what it tastes like. He doesn't want to eat it, right? My wife's mother picks with my kids because they have regular orders at like Starbucks. Like, you know, we go into Starbucks like, hey, what do you want? She said, get my regular. And we know what it is. Like, that's not our life. Like, you know, we never ate out. Like, you know, my dad would, you know, we would eat souse. Anybody remember what souse is? Yeah, we would eat. So, you know, that's where I grew up. That's not their experience, right? I have more money. They have their own room. We have a house. We didn't live in a house, right? We lived like, it was 7 of us in a 3-bedroom trailer. We're just different. And so I have to give my dad his context and give him grace for the way he lived. I have to take what he gave me, interpret it to see, like, yes, all the tough stuff, like he would make me, if I forgot to rake the yard at 9 o'clock at night, I remember it was freezing cold. He made me go outside and rake the yard because I should have done it when I had the time, but I didn't. I'm not going to do that to my son. I understand what he was trying to do, and I don't hold it against him. The lesson he was teaching me was a lesson, but how can I give that same lesson to my son in his way that he needs to understand? And so the way that we're doing it is different, but I know in my heart that all the things he was trying to teach me in all the ways, you have to understand it first and be able to interpret it and see the intention behind it. Can I give my son the same intention without inflicting not the harm, but the hardship of it? Because the hardship wasn't the lesson. The lesson was the love. The lesson was caring for your brothers and sisters, is why I had to get up early and cut the grass, or get up early and move the car for my mama if it was raining. Like, you know, all that stuff, the specific instances of what I did was not the lesson. And so learning that and then giving that to my son, giving him the love, nurturing who he is as a person, was what my dad did to me. I hope that's what he was thinking. I hope you don't think I'm soft and crying on TV and all this kind of stuff. But you know, but he also let me know that it was okay for me to be different and be more emotional than he is. That part of that is being a man. And so each version of how you become a man is going to be different for everybody, because everybody is different.
Yeah. Thank you for that. That's rich. I want to thank all of you for your sharing your stories. There's just so much in there. You know, when we talk about artists, artistic expression, becoming your true self, your authentic self, it's not always the unlearning, it's the learning the new skills, right? I think all of you have talked about the importance of picking up the skills to give the next generation, be it your own child or serving as a father figure or mentor to someone, skills that you had to learn. So it's not always the unlearning, although sometimes that's necessary, because we can re-traumatize our children, assuming that, hey, it worked for me, it'll work for them, but they're not you.
Exactly.
What I've learned about my son is my son's a loving, nice, kind, hugger, says I love you. And it used to concern me because my assumption based on my upbringing was that that was soft. What I've had to learn through doing my own work is that my son isn't soft, my son is whole. And that his emotional expression is evidence that he's fully human. One thing
And
I also
that you gave it to him.
I didn't give it to him.
With in a way that kids see their fathers is different than we see our sons.
Yeah, no,
I
well,
learned that about my dad a
yeah,
lot.
what you'll find when you read I Wish My Dad is he'll tell you himself. What I wanted to say is this. Artistic expression and emotional expression through the lens of a collector, not an artist, seem to go hand in hand. And I think that artistic expression, all of you do amazing work that shows your journey, shows your strength, your tenacity. In this next iteration for our culture and our people, that inner work of coming to grips with who we are as individuals, but who we are as people of color in this country, also requires an emotional experience. What I found out in a lot of my travels to Africa, and then studying our history, is that, during the transatlantic slave trade, it was not only illegal, but punishable to express love. That men and women who were in relationship had to make it a secret, because if you looked like you loved someone, you could be either beaten or sold. Because the slave owner knew that people who expressed love were dangerous, and that the expressions of feelings were only for those who have the right to feel and who were fully human. And so today, as people who are truly free, now the ability to say I love you to our children and to say I love you to those that we truly care about is not something we have to hide, but it's actually evidence that you must be free. Because there was a time when we couldn't do that. And so sometimes I wonder when it's hard to say I love you today, right? I always wonder, what still has you in bondage? Because as a person who is truly free, love is an expression of that freedom. I think that in this work that Black Art in America does is an expression of what that love looks like for us. I think that in my observation, what all three of you offer the world is an expression of what that love looks like for our culture and our people. And lastly, I want to say that each of you has really given us a story of how artists who are resilient, who are focused, who learn to turn off the noise, find their inner self, who have people like their fathers who give them protected, safe space to be all of who they are, can literally blaze a trail that breaks cycles of poverty, cycles of addiction, that equips our people with their story, with our history, with our legacy, simply through the gift that flows through their hands. And the art that God has blessed you with, the Creator has given you, that comes from your mind, your heart, your soul, to bless the rest of the world with, is layered with the ripple of generational gifts that all of us get to receive, and that your children get to be blessed by, that their children get to be blessed by, because of what you offer to the world as artists. And I just think that there's a lot of power in that for us. That when we look at these amazing images, there's so much more depth and a backstory that's breaking cycles, that's creating a legacy, and that's paving a new way forward for our people. So I want to thank each of you.
Thank you.
For offering up your time tonight, and to thank all of you for being here. Those were my closing remarks. I'm a person who's also a military veteran, so time is a thing for me. It is 8 minutes after 8. However, and we did say we would end at 8, and I want to honor your time on this Friday night. So with that, let's just, if we could all just thank Najee and Soteria Dorsey and and as we close, we'll take 2 questions and we'll close out tonight. Yes, sir.
Thank you all for coming. It's a very great experience. As a young artist, I think it's easy to revere each of you as kind of like a father figure in that, and just based and just given the legacy that each of you have established throughout that. So 2 parts in listening to it. I describe what you said as not robbing my son or children of their jewels. You know, you gotta have a little bit of that pain so that you know what you don't want. You know, you gotta eat sauce to know you don't want to eat that, right? So my question is that it's from an artist, and you all having kind of paved the way in that sense. What are some of the jewels that you would pass along, and what are some of the things that you would want to see in the same way as you each of you spoke about your sons and daughters? What are some of the things that you want to see not only from the Atlanta arts, Black arts, but just the arts? I know we spoke before about the unapologeticness, but what are some of the things that you all really want to see moving forward, and some of the things that you feel are imperative for young artists and in the next cycle as things evolve?
Well, one thing, you know how he was talking about love you? I got 18 grandkids, 8 children. We never hang up the phone, leave, whatever, without saying love you. All right? And that's circular. You know, how often are you going to see 2 cousins, you know, get ready to separate themselves and love you, you know, because we do that. You know, it's anything, nothing that, it's just catching, you know, and that makes that family thing work.
Let me see, I need this, I don't talk real loud. I would say for the Atlanta art scene, I think the Atlanta art scene is a strong scene. What I would like to see Atlanta artists do is to get outside of Atlanta. I think that the earlier you can get outside of Atlanta, you can gauge the field. You know, it's one thing to get some traction where you're at, and some of that may be pure support, some of it may be sympathetic support. So a lot of times you just need to go out and take the temperature of the rest of the market, and then come back and be willing to put in their work. I mean, you have to work. This is an extremely rare thing to make a living at. Now, if you want to just create, and you know, it's therapeutical for me, it saved my life, but I make a living at it. I've been making a living at it since I was 16. You have to be willing to compete. And competing means training. It means practicing. It means education. It means continued education. I learned from this brother. I go and sit with him and say, hey, look, how did you feel when you took this picture? Were you actually scared for your life? Or was the brazenness, did that come after the importance of the photograph? Or was you scared for real? Like, I need to know, because I'm trying to transfer this emotion from an eyewitness, because I'm not an eyewitness, so I go and talk to an eyewitness. That's how serious it is when I paint something. I go to Jamaal so that I can learn something that I don't know how to do, so I could be completely uncomfortable as an accomplished artist, so I can realize I don't know everything. Let me work at this. Let me be uncomfortable. Let me almost cut my finger off. And he say, brother, don't do it that way, you know. But he'll take my call. And I say, hey, Jamaal, you're at the studio? Yeah, I'm gonna pull up on you.
Right.
And I get in there and it's unorthodox and it's uncomfortable. But I work with it and work with it and work with it because I want to add a different element to my work because people may be getting stale to it. They may say, okay, we've been seeing that for 35 years. We're tired of seeing it. What's next? I'm already in here thinking about that color red on that teddy bear because I'm going to use that in something because I'm sitting there looking at it over and over and over again. You understand what I'm saying? I'm going to flip it my way, but I'm influenced by it because that's somebody new. That's somebody that's emerging. That's somebody that's coming through. And as an old head, you have to be conscious of what the younger heads are doing. And as a younger head, we don't owe you anything until you merge. That's my whole thing, merge. I hear about dreamers every day. Like all day. Like if I open my DMs, it's ridiculous. I'm dreaming. Could you help me? Could you help me? Could you help me? Merge. Get your horsepower up, get on the entry ramp, and when I look to my side and I see you, that brother ready. Let's ride. I'm gonna be the first one to say, let's ride. I'm not gonna get off the interstate and come get you. Don't think that. Don't think I owe you that. None of that. Work hard. I tell my son the same thing. You got to work. My daughter, 10, same thing, work. That's it. But as soon as you can, take your show somewhere else, show some work somewhere else, but don't nobody know your name. Worst thing that can happen, you finna come back and go harder.
I made sure all of my kids, all of my family know my story. It ain't always, my grandfather is Jamaal. No, You know my story. You don't have to tell it, but you know my story. So at least you got a point at which you know you may need to back up at some point. If you're trying to follow in my steps. Know who and what you are and go for it. I've never tried to make any of my kids be photographers, but I made sure I taught all of them something about it. And if you want to, here it is. I'm here.
I think that what both of them are saying, and they've been in the game a lot longer than me, so like lean on their advice. Like most of all, I think my experience has taught me that Atlanta artists need to study more. Like you need to study to learn. I think it's a underground kind of thing where like they shun academics because of like the way that the politics behind the institutions and like the systematic racism behind it is a lot of that. But I've been teaching and I've just got my MFA, so I'm telling everybody I've benefited greatly just from intense study of other things. And you learn so much from it. And you have to be open to the critique that comes along with it and be open to the knowledge that you get from seeing how people in Africa are operating on a high level, that you got brothers in India that are operating on a high level. Like you gotta look beyond just what we do and the congratulations and the shaking hands and like you did that, now I'm gonna put, trees in my stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like it's a way that we all use these symbols and we don't push beyond that boundary because we just don't know. And so you have to have this profound curiosity inside of your work.
I gotta say one thing. It's not that many people in here, so I'm gonna go ahead and say this publicly. This is what you call a lion in a lamb costume, okay? So what happens is the lamb costume don't really fit them all the way, and you can still see the fangs and the teeth. And this is a lion, okay? In case you don't know how to identify lions, this is a lion. He's humble, he's quiet.